So, Alexander, Boris Johnson missed the Monday, I believe it was the Monday phone call with Putin. He was out doing other things, giving a speech to the House and trying to save his job, given the Sue Gray report, and he really bungled that as well. But anyway, we did a video on that. He finally did get to speak with Putin. This is after Putin spoke with Macron, and Putin has met with Orban, and here comes Johnson. Rolling along and speaking with Putin. What did they talk about, Alexander? What was the outcome of that discussion? And before we get into the video, Alexander, just a real quick shout out to everyone that is watching us on Rumble, watching this video on Rumble. You can also join us on Locals as well via the integration. You'll see a button right there on the top of this video. So everyone that's watching us with Rumble, click that button on top, that Locals button, and you can subscribe to Locals straight through the button on Rumble. They're integrated there, and we just wanted to mention that because a lot of people are starting to watch us on Rumble, and when you watch us on Rumble, you can also get easy access to our Locals community via that button. Anyway, Alexander, Boris, and Putin.
Yeah, I mean, from the sublime to the ridiculous, because this is what it really is. I mean, first of all, I get the sense that the Russians have had it up to there with Boris. I mean, I think that they utterly, not just Boris, by the way, but with the British as well. I mean, the whole thing has had a madcap quality. I mean, a generally farcical one. So we've had the British coming along. They're sending arms to Ukraine, light anti-tank weapons, which are of dubious utility if there was a war between Ukraine and Russia, which, anyway, the Russians say they've got no plan to launch. And Boris wants to send his foreign minister, Liz Truss, who's completely incompetent, and his defense minister, Ben Wallace, who's also completely out of his depth, to Moscow. Boris wanted Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, to come to London to meet Ben Wallace, but the Russians said no. So, of course, instead of going to the Russians coming to London, Liz Truss and Shoigu have to go to Moscow. So then he was going to have this telephone call with Putin on Monday. He wasn't able to keep the call. He wasn't able to keep the time because, of course, he had to save his job. As you rightly said, he went to the House of Commons. He delivered a disastrous speech. He put his job in more jeopardy. As I am making this programme, there's been a trickle of Conservative MPs sending to the head of the parliamentary party votes of no confidence in Johnson. It's not quite clear what will come of that, but anyway, that's a direct byproduct of that disastrous speech. So then, of course, Boris wants to call and speak to Putin a bit later in the day, and the Kremlin comes back and says, "No, you missed your time slot. We have given your time slot to Macron. You're the person that you, Boris, are not on speaking terms with at the moment. He's got some meaningful things to say. We're in the process of negotiating with him." And so the result is that he's had a big follow-up call with Putin. This comes just 3 days after Macron and Putin spoke before. So already the British are upset about that. Then the Russians say, well, we can't speak to you on Monday. We can't speak to you on Tuesday either, because we're speaking on Tuesday with Mario Draghi, the Prime Minister of Italy. And Draghi is coming along and talking to us. He wants to make sure that in spite of all this energy talk or all the sanctions talk, that Italy will continue to receive gas. And he's clearly supporting what his friend Macron is trying to do. So, you're not going to get that slot either. And you've got also to wait until after we've received our great friend, the man that we really respect, the European leader that we really respect, Viktor Orban of Hungary. So we have this meeting. Orban is coming to Hungary. Putin is going to speak to Orban. So you've been put right back to the back of the queue. And in the meantime, Johnson is running around Eastern Europe. He eventually arrives in Ukraine. It's been unkindly referred to, his summit meeting with Zelensky, has been unkindly referred to, first, by the way, by somebody who put this comment on a comment during my live show on locals about this, but it's now been repeated by many people in Britain. Two clowns, Zelensky and Johnson, coming together. That was the impression that this press conference gave. Absolutely zany press conference in which Johnson was, again, making all the threats against the Russians, playing the Churchill act, which is now wearing thin with many people. So he gets inundated by questions from the media, which are not about Ukraine. It's about his own political future, about the fact that his position in London is disintegrating. He has to explain to people in this press conference that no, he's not coming to Ukraine in order to save his job. He's coming to Ukraine because he really cares about Ukraine. That's the real issue. It's not about trying to cut a good figure in London. And he also has to tell people in this press conference that, yes, he's able to focus on the Ukrainian issue. He's not getting distracted by the fact that his job in London is in peril. So it's an absolute shambles of a press conference. And then finally, he manages to talk to Putin. And it's a non-conversation because he's got nothing meaningful to say to Putin. He's got nothing to say to Putin that others haven't already said, that hasn't been said many times already. And of course, Putin just takes this opportunity to just repeat all his own talking points. Ukraine is an internal conflict. There must be strict implementation of the Minsk agreement. Russia needs its legally binding security guarantees. So we've had this long build-up to this conversation between Boris and Putin. And of course, the conversation itself is completely empty of any content. It's a complete anticlimax. So the whole thing is an abject display. It shows how Britain has been completely sidelined, completely marginalised in all these discussions and negotiations which are now underway.
In the previous video that we did, we talked a lot about how how this whole Ukraine thing has weakened the U.S. is standing on a geopolitical stage. I mean, it's really shown the Biden team's foreign policy as clownish.
Yes.
I mean, it's been exposed.
Yes.
It really has exposed it. The same can be said about the UK and Boris Johnson. By the fact that Boris Johnson, and it's incredible when I say this,
Yes.
I have a hard trouble believing this. The fact that Boris Johnson actually followed the Biden White House down this ridiculous path,
Yes.
down this ridiculous narrative of an imminent Russian invasion of Ukraine, has really weakened the
Yes.
UK standing on the global stage.
Yes.
It's weakened Boris Johnson at home because he's not focusing on his domestic issues that he should really be focusing on, and it's exposed him and his foreign policy team as clownish.
Yes.
And I have a hard time saying it because I can't believe that there's no one in the Boris administration to say, you know what, Mr. Prime Minister, maybe this Biden guy and this Biden team is not exactly these aren't exactly the guys we kind of, want to emulate or want to follow down this road. They didn't realize that. I mean, they haven't taken a look at Biden and his team to say, let's just not, follow the U.S. on this one.
Absolutely, all the more so as the Biden team doesn't like Boris. I mean, they were opposed to Brexit. They were opposed to Boris anyway. I mean, it's like he's trying to suck up to them, to try to persuade them, well, actually, I'm on your side after all. So I'm going to go all out, be alongside you. And of course, he's landed now in a debacle, which is the debacle that we're going to be seeing unfolding. I mean, it's absolutely abject display. And again, one does wonder what kind of advice the British government is receiving from its officials and what kind of advice Johnson is getting and whether he's listening to that advice. I have to say, as a British person, I am deeply upset by all of this. I mean, obviously I can see the comedy in it, the farcical quality of all of this. But, Britain used to have a tremendous tradition of diplomacy. I mean, the British were superb at diplomacy. This inept, bungling display, one got the sense that the Ukrainians were sort of bewildered by Boris charging in like that. I mean, there were the attempts, waving flags and British flags and all of this. But I mean, one got the feeling that there was really no real understanding of what to say whilst Boris was there. And the French and the Germans are known to be extremely, well, to the extent that they think about Boris at all, they're known to be frankly irritated by all of this, which they feel is just a distraction. And the Americans are just not interested because the Biden administration is making its own mistakes and having to find ways of dealing with it. And as we discussed in the previous video, you get the sense that the permanent government of the United States, the deep state, the Treasury, the Commerce Department, the Fed, the Pentagon, are now looking at all of this. They've been going through all the sanctions ideas. They said enough's enough. They're going to try and bring a stop to it all. And that, of course, just leaves Boris and the British high and dry. How do they come round now and tell everybody, well, this invasion, this Russian invasion of Ukraine isn't imminent? I mean, the United States can just about do that because it's a superpower. How does Boris come along, especially after some of the things he was saying in Kiev? I mean, he was still continuing this narrative about the imminent Russian invasion. How does he now come back to London and tell people, well, this invasion isn't imminent after all?
I still can't quite figure out what the hell is in it for the UK with regards to Ukraine. I really can't. I mean,
No.
Biden, okay, the Biden White House,
No, yeah.
I can wrap my head around it. 10% for the big guy, Burisma, Pelosi, Kerry, the Clintons. Okay, I can see why they're so interested in Ukraine. I mean, there's gold in them hills, as they say, for these globalists. God knows they've made quite a few bucks out of Ukraine in the past. So I can understand it that they want to kind of dip their toes into those waters again. But what the hell is in it for the UK and for Boris Johnson? I mean, how come they just couldn't say, you know what? There's no corruption in it for us. There's no 10% for us. No. There's no EU solidarity for us in this anymore. No. I mean, why go down that path?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. And by the way, I mean, you must never make the mistake of thinking that media opinion in Britain reflects the sentiments of most British people. I think most British people are completely cynical and uninterested in the Ukrainian issue. And what they care about is the prospect of energy bills rising in the spring. And if there's a conflict and a smash up in Ukraine, which leads to those energy bills rising even further, and they get the idea that Boris in some way is partly responsible for that, well, they won't thank him for it. So, I mean, and you're absolutely right. There is nothing good in this for Britain. But I'm going to say this. Ever since Donald Trump left the presidency, this government in Britain has been on a kind of frenetic drive to try to persuade both itself and the world that it's got some kind of plan and that it is relevant. So we've seen a whole set of bizarre things done. We had that frigate that sailed close to Sevastopol, and which the Russians apparently came pretty close to blowing up. We've had the ridiculous display after the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, with the British actually claiming that they'd been thinking about going it alone in Afghanistan without the Americans, which nobody takes seriously. I mean, it's a ludicrous idea. We've had the British sending a their aircraft carrier without any fighters on it to they're American, they're marine, US Marine Corps fighters on this aircraft carrier to the South China Sea, which has impressed no one and irritated the Chinese. And we've now had the British playing this big game, which of course isn't a game with any substance, over Ukraine as well. And the only explanation I can think of is that Boris had staked everything on doing some big trade deal with Donald Trump. But the moment Donald Trump wasn't on the scene, he really had no real cards left to play. And so he's been going around the world, taking all these steps and all these measures in order to persuade himself and the world that both he and Britain still matter. And it's completely the wrong approach to take. I mean, the right thing to do is to work hard, build up relations, work hard on sorting out trade treaties with all sorts of countries, work out on sorting out Brexit itself, focus on those sort of things. But of course, that's not Boris. He's not somebody who works 15 hours a day, grinding out the details, thinking through all the things that need to be done. He doesn't have that kind of personality. And so the result is we have all of these ludicrous gestures, which of course all that they do is they make Britain look ridiculous to everybody around the world. By the way, there was that UN Security Council debate where the British ambassador, spoke in the most lunatic way. His comments were they far surpassed in hysteria even what the Americans were saying. And you had country after country, India, Brazil, Mexico, Ghana, Kenya, Gabon, many of these countries, of course, members of the British Commonwealth, India and Kenya, all talking about the need to calm down, the need to follow quiet diplomacy. Well, obviously, a lot of that was directed at the Americans, but it was surely directed at the British too. So no one is impressed. No one is following all of this. It's losing Britain respect and friends around the world. It's been a disastrous performance.
Yeah, that's my point on all of this. To close out the video, like I said, I could see that the history of corruption with the Bidens vis-a-vis Ukraine. Okay, I get it. I can understand France and Germany having an interest in Ukraine, given that they were a party to the Minsk agreements.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. The UK, I fail to understand. What exactly do you guys really care about with regards to Ukraine? I don't understand it at all.
Absolutely.
It's just not your fight.
Well, exactly. If I can just mention one important fact about the Minsk agreement, which is, of course, that for the British, the Minsk agreement came as a shock, and of course, it is a sign of how this anti-Russian policy that Britain has been following has in effect marginalized Britain, because the Minsk agreement was the first big geopolitical agreement in Europe made since, well, heavens knows when, the 18th century, if you like, which did not involve Britain. The French and the Germans doing a deal with the Russians, and the British are not a part of it. The British were shocked by it. And, you can see how they're struggling ever since to try to regain some kind of relevance and are just marginalizing themselves even further. But you're absolutely right. The British have completely lost their way in this conduct of their diplomacy, and they've lost everybody's respect. Consider the disrespect the Russians have shown them. How the Russians put off this meeting with this telephone call between Putin and Johnson. He's relegated to the back of the queue after Macron, Draghi, and Orban. He's not going to be received in Moscow. Macron and Scholz, and of course Orban, Orban has been there. Macron and Schulz are going there. Biden is talking about another summit meeting. That's already been floated. There's no talk that the Russians are interested in speaking to Johnson. So Britain is isolated, disrespected by the Russians, seen as an irritant by the Europeans, ignored by the Americans, and its attempts to attract attention to itself by this overactive foreign policy that we've seen over the last year is not only failing, it's doing more harm. The sooner this is stopped and we start concentrating on our pressing internal problems, sorting out Brexit, getting our economy back on proper lines, forging all those trade deals, the better. And sooner or later, we're going to have to talk to the Russians in a civil way.
Yeah, God knows. It's not as if, Boris doesn't have enough troubles and enough things to deal with at home.
Well, indeed.
I mean, why did he go off and on this adventure? I have no idea. It makes zero sense to me.
It makes zero sense. But then you see, Alex, you're a rational man, and you come from a diplomatic family, so you have that sense of how diplomacy should be conducted. And of course, what Boris has been doing violates every single rule of how diplomacy should be conducted. He was a terrible foreign minister, and in foreign policy terms, he's been a terrible prime minister too. Yeah,
and he picked a really bad time to leave. That's for sure.
He shouldn't have gone to Ukraine at this time. He should have been focusing on shoring up his position in London. I mean, he's got to understand that that's what really matters at the moment, and he's got to try to put together some kind of effective government and some kind of plan to stay in power, because at the moment things are not looking good for him. Anyway, and he's going to start picking some good ministers as well. I mean, Liz Truss is frankly a disaster. And Ben Wallace comes across to me as a decent man, but completely out of his depth as Defence Secretary, and profoundly ignorant of Russian matters. So, I mean, he's got to stop picking people who know their job.
And just stop following the Biden White House lead.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the easiest thing to do. Just
absolutely
take a look at the Biden White House.
Absolutely. Well,
don't
indeed, absolutely.
follow what they're doing.
Absolutely. And pay less attention to these ex-soldiers on the Tory backbenches. Again, I mean, many of them, no doubt, decent people, but frankly, they're not very bright. Their understanding of global politics and geopolitics is poor. And playing to that kind of gallery, it's not going to help you with your domestic politics in the end. And all it's going to do is going to lose Britain respect and your self-respect too.
Okay, we will leave it there. Alexander, once again, for everyone watching us on Rumble, you will find a button right up there, somewhere up there, and click that button. That'll take you directly, Alexander, to our locals community. And you'll get all kinds of great content. Every Wednesday, you also do a live stream as well on locals. Mm-hmm. And, it's fully integrated into the Rumble ecosystem. So all you have to do is click that button right on top, and you'll become part of our locals community. That's simple, that easy.
That easy.
All right. And ODYSEE, BitChute, and Super U as well. You will find us on those platforms as well. And good day. That is
good
the code
day.
for Duran Shop.
Good day off. And you can see shirts and mugs, of course. Good day.
That's right. Magic mugs with good day and flags as well. Take care, everybody.
Thanks as well.